Welcome to Deep Thrones Pod. We're doing a new series called Westeros Stories, where we enter the world of Ice and Fire with new perspectives and a focus on individual successes and struggles. This is part 3 of 4. We hope you enjoy it.
Check out the hand, switch, shooters on swoosh, hitters don't miss. Aria just added a ton of y'all to my list. Bitch, death wish, not to be messed with, tested quiz. They shooting shots, hitting bricks.
All right, this is John Sheedy's story for Westeros Stories. Chris, thank you again for coming up with this idea. Mine is called Coliver's Travels. Coliver is a character I created. You'll see his story in just a moment. We begin. Coliver did not want to go to King's Landing. None of the Northerners did, least of all Lord Stark. Northerners in the south are as out of place as the highborn in Flea Bottom. But none of that matters now. King Joffrey saw to that. Coliver wanted to cut through the screaming crowd at King's Landing and do to the bastard king what his butcher just did to Lord Eddard. It was a beautiful day in King's Landing. The sky was clear blue, not at all reminiscent of what was happening below, as a streak of red covered Ilan-Payne's sword. But he could not process all of his thoughts at one time. He saw Lady Sansa crying. He saw the king celebrating gallantly. He thought about Lady Catelyn, Robb, Bran, Rickon, even Ned's bastard Jon. Coliver was not there when Ned was taken captive. Had he been, things would have been different, surely. He was sure of it. He would have fought to free his lord, avenge the North, and avenge Jory. Where was Arya? What would Robb do? What about Stannis? Coliver was not even meant to be here. Slightly older than Lord Stark's children, he was taken in to learn under Lord Eddard at Winterfell. His father, a Stark bannerman, died during Robert's rebellion. As just a babe, Coliver's mother died from winter fever. After being born with such bad luck, Coliver considered himself lucky getting to learn and grow at Winterfell. He was not as close to the Stark children as their bastard brother, or even Theon Greyjoy, but he learned under Ned Stark all the same. Sir Roderick trained Coliver with the Stark children. He was rough with the sword, but he had an iron chin, able to take hits during parleys, with not so much as a blink. But here he was, helpless, as Sir Ilan-Payne ended Lord Stark's life. What had happened? Before Lord Stark was taken captive, he sent Coliver off. Surely he too would have been killed if he entered the throne room with the other Northerners. Just like his childhood, Coliver counted himself lucky, even with such bad luck. Coliver did not know what to do, but he did know that he has to leave King's Landing. I must go north, he thought to himself. I must find Robb. I'm going to do the accents. As the crowd cheered for King Joffrey as he held the former hand of the king's head above his own, Coliver ran. He ran away from the mob, away from those who killed Ned Stark, away from those who would kill him if they knew he was from the north, away from King's Landing. Coliver ran down the streets, alleys, corridors. Coliver ran past the slums of Flea Bottom and the Street of Silk. No one knows who I am, he thought, but he couldn't help but feel King Joffrey and his guards were right behind him, chasing him to bring him back to face the same justice as his lord. As Coliver ran past street peddlers and beggars, he could see the gates in the distance, his path to freedom. Surely guards would be on high alert for any Northerners trying to leave the city. Maybe I can sneak past, Coliver thought. No one has paid any mind to me my whole life. Why would they now? But he knew in this time of war, even he would face questioning from the guards. As Coliver reached the gate, a guard shouted, "You there! Where you think you're going?" "Home," Coliver said with confidence, as this was no lie. "Where's home?" the guard asked, with a face so hard Valyrian steel itself might not cut it. Coliver wanted to say the north, to Winterfell, to raise the banners with Robb Stark and put the bastard king's head on a spike. But Coliver, learning up at Winterfell, his lessons came in handy as he yelled, "Rosby, a village in the northeast of King's Landing. I wish to run and tell my kin the traitor is dead." "Better get a move on then," the guard said, and just like that, Coliver was through the gates of King's Landing. He still felt the same fear as he ran north down the King's Road, that Joffrey, or even the Hound, was in pursuit. But this false danger was a distraction from the new dangers. Coliver was far from Winterfell. He had no horse and no coin. All he had was a sword at his hip. but he would find a way back to Winterfell, back to the north. There he could join Robb's army, come back south, and rescue Sansa and Arya. And maybe Robb would even let Coliver have the honor of killing Ilan Payne himself, as he knew Joffrey would be reserved for Robb, as only a king could behead a king. Coliver thought of the irony of it all. He never wanted to come south, and now he was free to go home, free to go north, and yet, when he gets there, sword in hand, he finally will want to come back south.
Woo!
Booyah.
Snaps.
Thank you. Thank you for coming to my poetry slam. All right, and that was my story, Coliver's Travels. Any questions? I kick it to you, fine folks.
Awesome. Well, first off, thanks for sharing. That was a great story. Coliver's an awesome character. And the whole point of kind of what we wanted to get into with Westeros Stories was within these larger events, these larger-than-life things that we all remembered and they kind of made an impact on our lives. Like, what's going on off-screen? And, like, where would a regular person like us, like, fit into these stories? And so I love that you kind of worked that angle in. Also, the accents were awesome.
Thank you.
Great job there.
It took me a while to really gear into them, you know, because at first I missed Coliver's first line, but once I got going, the guard, I made him a little more Cockney.
Oh, yeah. Exactly. Well done. Well, I'll kick off the interview with, you know, just the overarching question of what was your motivation for this story, and can you kind of take us through your writing process?
Yeah, I think Coliver, in a lot of ways, was my subconscious watching the Ned Stark scene, right? Because Ned's death to me was bigger than anything else in Game of Thrones. Like, and I mean that. The Red Wedding I had sort of heard about before I watched. Ned's death was completely a surprise. Like, I remember texting you afterwards, like, dude, I had no clue. Like, I thought... Like, up until when Sir Ilan Payne drew his sword, I was like, man, how's he going to get out of this? Because every piece of media in your life, the good guy gets out of it. Yeah. And so when writing this story about Coliver, I had to keep in mind that, like, you know, like, look how George R. R. Martin writes. Like, what would any of us want to do in that situation? We'd want to cut through the crowd and save Ned Stark, but that's just not going to happen in Game of Thrones world. So all he had to do was watch it, take his medicine, see that his lord is dead, and then try to escape. So it's like there's no saving Ned Stark. The blood is dry on that one. So
you know what I like about your response there is you said, like, that's not happening in George R. R. Martin's world. And what's interesting is that's not happening in real life either.
No,
right?
exactly.
Like if we look at, you know, even if you put it in a modern setting, or if you want to go to a medieval type setting that's similar, no one's coming out of the crowd and being like, "Hey, cut this out. This isn't right."
Yeah, and this isn't me like taking a dig at superhero movies, because I freaking love superhero movies. But the stakes are like low because people are like, "Oh, I wonder what's going to happen." I'm like, they've already named that 4 sequels are happening. Like, we know XYZ superhero is going to be fine. Yeah. You know what I mean? So like when the stakes are high and like a character that's beloved gets his head cut off while his daughter is standing there screaming, and this kid who you despise does it, and like the bad guy wins, which in life that happens.
Yeah. No, I think that's so true. So one of my favorite parts about what you just read was the fact that you established that this guy, our main character, is like clear. His stakes in this are, oh my God, somebody's gonna recognize me, somebody's gonna see me getting out of the city, and his like loyalty to the Highborn, I think, is super interesting. And I think that happened in it's like he's like so loyal to Ned Stark, but the reality is Ned Stark and the Starks have already forgotten about him.
Oh, exactly. I think that's a great reference for the Game of Thrones world in general, right?
Yeah.
As you look at like Call the Banners, you know.
I love that it's juxtaposed by the fact that he gets to the guards, he gives one tiny lie, and they're just like, oh yeah, and they just dismiss him. Exactly.
It's the, like, when writing it too, like, a lot of it was, you remember in season 7, it was a fan service scene because they shoehorned Ed Sheeran into the scene.
Oh yeah.
But the conversation they have with Arya is great because it's Lannister soldiers, but they're saying, like, we've never met any Lannisters. We're just fighting for money, essentially. You know what I mean? And that's, most wars are fought by people who have no say in the war, you know? Yep. But Coliver does have that loyalty to the Starks, even though, like you said, like, he's not Theon even. He's not Jon. He's, like, just a foot soldier, you know?
Yeah. They probably don't even recall his name.
No.
Completely
they see him, they'll be like, oh my God, it's you. You made it.
Well, you talked us through a lot of the feelings that you felt when you first saw Ned being executed. One thing that you mentioned in Coliver's story was that he felt helpless as it was happening.
Yeah.
And I kind of got the feeling that it was important for you to include that emotion in there. Am I on the mark on that?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, that's like I think that's like such a normal human thing, especially like the initial anxiety of something. Like, obviously, seeing your Lord Liege's head cut off is not something most of us can relate to. Mm-hmm. But just in life, I feel like there's situations like that I think that's what George does a good thing in his writing, is that it's medieval, there's dragons, there's all this whimsical stuff happening, but you can sort of relate to it in terms of just the emotion of like a tragic event and like how it affects you, right?
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because I held off for I think about a year and a half or 2 years on starting Game of Thrones because I heard, oh, there's dragons in it and there's zombies.
Yeah.
And when you turn it on, like, yeah, the first scene has like a White Walker in it, but it also brings out like a lot of visceral emotion that you really like don't see even in like a lot of dramas with like just human characters. Like a lot of it was better acting and more
100%.
believable in some senses than a lot of other shows.
It's because of the emotions and the stakes. Like, we talk about this all the time. The three of us get it a lot because of the nature of the podcast we do, of people being like, oh, it's so cool that you do that, but I just can't watch that show. I don't get into it. And I always say, like, listen, I'm a great example. I mean, you remember telling me to do the podcast, how long it took me to convince me. But I said, I was like...
Well, once I mentioned we were going to do a podcast...
then I was like, all right, I'm in.
But I tried for years to get you to watch the show.
But once you watch it, it's not about dragons, it's not about zombies. It's about politics, family, and power. Mm-hmm. And it's three things that no matter who you are, one of those three things appeals to you, or all three, or two of the... it doesn't...
Or all three affect you.
Oh, for sure. You're... And that's like Coliver. All three affect him, and he has zero effect on any of it.
Mm-hmm. Well said.
I think, what you're dancing around is all like world building technique, and it's just so funny to me that people won't get into Game of Thrones because it's fantasy and it's unrealistic. But one, for me, what is so fantastic about the current reality that we live in that you don't want to leave it?
Yeah, I know.
But two is like you just said, they still build a world in there that's super realistic. And
oh, for sure. And I mean,
but when you were writing this, did you have any trouble? Like, you did it pretty well. You like really quickly set up the scene. You didn't write, you didn't have to spend 7 pages describing the scene to set it. And then you even have the moment where he's like running through King's Landing. You have great details like winter fever, stuff like that. Did you have any issues with trying to build the world in like world authentic details?
Yes. Yeah, I think my biggest issue is I cut out George R. R. Martin in a lot of his writing, like it'll be 3 pages on a meal prep, and
you get hungry reading.
You get hungry. You want to take a little nibble of that mead, but is mead food?
No, it's a drink. It's a thick drink.
Well, it's thick, so you can nibble it. Yeah, you can nibble it a little bit. You can get a nibble on there, but so. When one of Chris's notes he gave me was like, early on, there's not much setting of King's Landing at all, like the atmosphere. And those were important notes for me because it was true. And like, I cut out I'm straight to the point when I write, which is not good because you want that world. Like George's 3 pages about the food and making you hungry. That's so powerful. You're reading a book and you're like, this medieval meal he's describing sounds good. So that's something that I would want to change for the next time. But also... This character I've thought about for a long time, like since I started watching Game of Thrones, and I kind of have a journey for him. So if we do more of these, we might see him at different points.
Awesome.
Okay.
Yeah, I was actually... I like that. That was going to be my final question here, but I had some more leading up to that point. But we'll cut to that for now. The story ends, and really what's happening is this is Culver's beginning.
Yeah.
Right?
This is the beginning of Culver's Travels.
Coliver. I said Culver because I'm hungry.
We love Culver's here, and that's a plug.
That's a plug.
And it would be cool if you gave us a little money.
Money or gift card.
Gift cards to
trade
Culver's.
Value.
Oh, that's true. I didn't even think about the fact that Coliver is so close to Culver's. I didn't even do that. I'm not even kidding. I didn't do that on purpose. Coliver, and Culver's is Culiver.
There's no I in Culver's.
There's not? Oh, you're right.
Yeah.
You're right. Yeah, you're right. It's
We'll
Culver's.
cut that so that we can
out.
get the sponsorship from Culver's.
And he does say once he gets past the guard, and I cut it, but he screams randomly, "Welcome to Delicious." Which it was completely coincidental. It's just his catchphrase.
So the story ends, and his travels are really, and his problems are just beginning.
Oh, yeah.
Is there anything that and you might be working on this already, is there something that you can share about, like, what lies ahead for him?
Yeah, so I will say this. He never gets to Rob's army. Let's be honest. Rob's army is mobilizing. They're not worried about what Coliver's up to at this point. At this point, he's already called the banners. He called the banners when Ned was alive, right? They might have even declared him king before Ned gets beheaded. I might be wrong about that, but if I go back in season 1. So let's just be perfectly honest. Like, he's never getting there. Is he going to die? Not yet, no. I got him on a whole journey. But he's not getting to Rob's army. But he's also not getting to the north. He's going to have a lot of fun on the King's Road. And not really fun. I just mean he's going to be like, oh, fuck. He has nothing right now.
Yeah.
So he's got to worry about survival. And we're basing this off of George R.R. Martin in season 1 through 4 Game of Thrones travel. He's got a ways to go.
Yeah.
He doesn't have the season 8 jetpack. He doesn't have the flash pass. He's got to take his time on these travels. And he's got to be smart, because Brothers Without Banners, other, people loyal to the Lannisters on the King's Road heading north. Like, he's
bandits and vagabonds.
Oh, for sure.
I think that's awesome. So in this story, you really grounded it immediately in Joffrey and Sansa, and I immediately knew where we were in the Game of Thrones story. So are you going to have, as he leaves King's Landing, is it going to be your own characters, or is it going to be more characters we recognize, or a blend of both?
It'd be a blend of both for sure. Especially early on, it'd probably be a fair amount of my own creation, but mostly just nameless peasants, So those exist all around Westeros, George loves them. But I think having him interact, this is prime time for him to bump into a Beric Dondarrion type. You know what I mean?
For sure.
Yeah.
But not want to join him because he's so focused on. He's but I have a banner kind of thing.
Cool.
And like you said, I think I didn't even really think about that enough. That the sort of power thing of Coliver is so in bed with I am a bannerman for the North, and like you said, he's just another foot soldier. Which. We all love the Starks, we all love the Lannisters, but at the end of the day, there's a fair amount of collateral that gets forgotten.
Oh, for sure. Which is one of the things that I'm sure the listeners will come to love about the Westeros Stories is we're going to put some faces on the small folk, or even some of the nobility that doesn't get covered on screen.
100%.
Did you have a moment, and I'm asking this, but I know the answer to the question because I looked at your face as you were reading it. But did you have a moment as you were reading that you couldn't read your own writing? Yeah.
So this is important. This is honestly, I'm glad we're getting to this. I'm almost offended that you asked this, but this gotcha journalism. You're a disgusting person. That's a disgusting question. But yeah, no, I did, and it's because Kinsey and Sims are smart, and they were like, "Hey, this technology exists where you could type." And I was, in my mind, because I used to, when I did comedy, I would handwrite the jokes. And I felt like it helped with, creative, because you're, in it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But my wrist was getting sore. So I was, scribbling words. And, there was a few moments where I couldn't read what I wrote. And I sort of paused for dramatic effect, and I was like, I'll just make a word up. And I did a few times. I don't know. No one knows. We'll need a Rosetta Stone. Someday someone will find this book and be like, this ancient language. Oh, it is moron English.
Ye old
I
moron.
just think it's so funny that your immediate instinct was to go write it down handwritten. But now it makes more sense that you used to write your comedy handwritten.
I wanted, because I felt with this kind of medieval, I wanted a quill and ink. I wanted to do that. Mm-hmm. But I don't have, where do you get that from?
And a candlestick.
I went to Staples and they told me to get out. They were
I feel like there's still some pens that exist like that.
Some quill. Kinsey is grabbing one. She's got a quill. Oh my God! Look at that.
Shout out to Franny. She gave me this.
All right. Do you do signatures with it?
No, I just, when I really feel, inspired, I write in my little journal with that. It's just a very fun way to write.
I would bust that out if the FedEx guy had me sign for something. I'd be like, give me a second. He's like, I got a pen right here. I'd be like, give me a sec.
The ink is very spillable, though.
Oh, for sure, yeah. They do that on purpose.
It gets everywhere, so you just gotta...
Oh, you spilled?
Yeah. Well, then what I did was I took like the wax, that they do when they send ravens.
Oh, yeah.
That would be fun,
Burn it,
and we
yeah.
get our own like DT
Melt
pod.
it.
That crisp bad radio, because now the camera I'm learning, but we get this on some ink or like a stamp.
Oh yeah.
Mm.
And then you guys could buy that too. You
Yeah,
can buy that. You can get all that merch.
Yeah.
You see this logo, guys? Do you see this?
It's beautiful.
It's beautiful. And those of you who are listening to this, you don't see it. But again, we're figuring that out. This is new for all of us, so we'll figure it all out.
The video portion is
There's going to be a fair amount of bad radio, I think, early on in season 2 of House of the Dragon, which we're very excited about. Sorry. Do you guys have any more questions?
I'm
good.
all set. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for listening to Coliver's Travels. I really appreciate that.
No, and
I'm excited to hear more.
There will be more of these Westeros stories, and please send us your feedback on these. We love, and even if you come up with a short story on your own, that would be an awesome add into our show.
Love on our Instagram if you DM us and say, I've thought about this. I've thought about a character in Westeros.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's human nature to put yourself into these stories. And again, these are coming out. We're going to have House of the Dragon Season 2 coming up. We don't know the release date yet, but we're looking forward to it.
Beautiful. Well, thanks again, Sheedy.
Thank you.
And we will be back soon.
Check out the hand switch, shooters on swoosh, hitters don't miss. Already just added a ton of y'all to my list. Bitch, death wish, not to be messed with, tested quiz. They shooting shots.